Just before I was coming here, I almost had to cancel because my wife broke her ankle a few days ago, completely immobilized. But my son, it's great having slacker millennials who are your progeny, because my son was available to move in, and now he's taking care of her. But one thing that happened that's a testing sort of thing is that I was in the right before her operation to reattach her foot to her leg, or more or less, is she had to go into the anesthesiology room to get a nerve blocker prior to the operation. And they said, come in, you can sit there and watch. And so I came in. Of course, I'm looking around with a tester's eye at all the equipment that's around there, like, how does this work? What happens if I hit this button? And they had this ultrasound thing there, and there's wires coming out of it and everything, and the nurse and the anesthesiologist are there, and he's talking me through this, and I noticed that there's labels, handmade labels, all over this expensive piece of equipment. And he said, oh yeah, because it's complicated to use, so we label the buttons to make sure we press the right ones at the right time. I'm wondering if the manufacturer is aware of this. And when I'm testing, I'm always thinking, how is the product actually going to be used in the field? Are people putting labels all over it? Are they putting stickers on it? And then right in the middle of the procedure, he says, press the print button, and this error message that came up saying, printer offline. And he said, oh, it's not plugged in. So the nurse in the middle of this procedure is dodging over cables to get around to plug the thing in. And I'm hoping, like, don't kick out those lifelines, please. It's a fascinating experience to watch all the beeps and boops and people talking to each other, different pieces of equipment. And I know that that piece of equipment, that ultrasound thing, was tested all by itself in a lab that only had one kind of beep and nobody forgetting to plug in things. So it's just something to keep in mind as we are testing. Now, I'm going to talk about meta testing. I thought this was such a cool topic when I came up with it. Meta testing. Ooh, meta. The word occurred to me, and I thought that would be great. Let's do a talk on that, because I think testers need to become meta testers these days. But then as soon as I started actually putting together the talk, I realized this is a really big subject. It's a huge subject. It's at least three meanings. There's the theoretical meaning, the self-referential meaning, and the practical meaning. Okay, so theoretically, you could say meta testing is the ontological and epistemic underpinnings of software testing. So when I'm out there talking to the guy selling Canoe, and I correct him because he says that we verify that everything's correct. And I go, oh no, we can't verify that everything's correct. We can simply witness that there are problems. There could, of course, be problems you're not aware of, even though you don't see anything go wrong. See, that is meta testing of a philosophical kind. And telling people there's no such thing as automated testing, for instance, that's a philosophical meta testing statement. Very tiresome. I managed to not tell that to the guy selling Canoe. I didn't correct him the 9,000 times he told me that this does automated testing, and I kept wanting to say, only testers do testing. That tool is doing fact checking. But that's one kind of meta testing. The philosophical, logical underpinnings, what is verification versus testing, the philosophy of science, all that stuff. Testing of a test process, which you may have done, I have done. I call that audit testing usually. That's also a kind of meta testing. So you come in and you do testing after a testing group has already done testing, and your goal is to test the testing group, really. You're trying to find things that they didn't find so that you can figure out what might be the limitations of this testing process that they just went through if I can find problems that they didn't. It's also very common in security, of course. Penetration testing is essentially that kind of thing. That could be a kind of meta testing. But what I want to talk about is the third sense of it, the practical sense, creating or improving testing without necessarily testing. That's a meta position as well. And then when I started saying, yeah, that's what I want to talk about, I realized I could have just called the talk Test Management. And So I want to just say that on the record so that you don't see this whole talk and go, did he just do a talk about test management, but he called it meta testing because he's trying to be hip and cool? Yes, it's like this. I want to do a talk on test management without test managers. And that is really important. That is quite necessary these days because test managers have gone away. The thick, warm coat that the test managers used to have is just not adaptable for the warm environment that we find ourselves in today. So I was thinking of woolly mammoths related to this and realized it's quite similar. What's happened to test managers is quite similar to what has happened to the woolly mammoths. I found this wonderful paper with all these different analyses and lines of evidence in it. I don't know, I guess there's no laser here, but the horizontal axis is going back in time thousands of years, down to 45,000 years, and it's looking at pollen counts in different areas of the world and historical temperatures based on ice core samples. And the question is, did the mammoths die out because of climate change, or did the mammoths die out because humans killed all of them? Which is that? So they're analyzing the climate change and then correlating that to the red part is humans and the yellow is the mammoths. And what's interesting is that the humans came along and didn't immediately wipe out the mammoths. So maybe it's both. Maybe climate change and hunting by the agilists have taken out the managers. That's what I was thinking when I saw this. It's really similar to what's happened in the 90s. My background in testing goes back to 1987. See, I started as a developer in 82. But I'm like a hillbilly mountain man. I worked in my first job was doing video games, writing code for video games for Commodore 64s and Apple II computers in my boss's living room. Then I got upgraded to his laundry room. Finally, he built a garage, and my third iteration, I was working in a garage doing coding. Then Apple Computer hired me in 87 as a test manager, having never tested before and knowing nothing about management. So that's how screwed up our industry is. But it was a building full of testers. It was 400 software testers out of 12,000 Apple Computer employees. I think they have like 3.8 million employees now, but back then they had 12,000 employees. And I was one of those guys, but all the testers were all concentrated in one place. And we had a little tester village. And we had little conferences. We would set up on our cubicles little posters and stuff and have little drinks. And then people would walk around and see what all the other testers were doing. So there was a real testing culture. And then in 89, that went away. In 89, they disbanded the big testing division, and then they disbanded all the little testing groups, and then all the little testing teams got also eviscerated. The entire testing culture got wiped out like it was smallpox that came through. That was 1989. So in case anyone's thinking that this agile thing of maybe we don't need tester roles is from 2003, 89 is when it happened at Apple. So almost at the beginning of my career as a tester, I've been struggling with trying to convince management that testing actually is a thing, it's worth studying, it's worth preserving, and that if you have people who've never done it before managing testers, that might not be the ideal situation. So this is what I think happened. In my experience, starting around the end of the 80s, but maybe it started elsewhere and sooner, I'm not sure. But I went to a lot of conferences and I've seen a lot in the industry all through that time. I'm pretty sure it started right around the end of the 80s. What started is, first of all, management abdicated responsibility. I was fighting all through the 90s to try to get management to get out of the mud and to start thinking creatively. So there was this big focus. If you went to any testing conference in 1989, 1990, 1991, it's all about scripting, scripting, scripting. Scripting and automation, but mostly scripting. If you're going to be a professional tester, write all your tests down. That's the only way to do professional testing. And I was saying, that's crazy and wrong, and nobody does that. But no one was speaking up about that. So I got famous in 1993 at my first conference talk, because my first conference talk was about ad hoc testing, I called it. Later we called it exploratory testing, where we said, why does everyone say that we should write down all these test cases when everybody knows the way you find bugs is not by doing that. You interact with the product, and that's how you find lots of bugs fast. And everybody knows that who actually does this. And the only people who are writing test cases down are doing that mainly because they're afraid of their management, and their management is telling them they have to do this. So we have a problem with management. So I think that management never really tried to work on the craft aspects of software testing to create testing excellence, or a bunch of us were trying to push that, but it didn't take. And then the Agilists came along. And so the Agilists basically wanted to fire all the testers. When Agile was created, when extreme programming, which one of the earliest iterations of Agile was created, they just didn't see a place for testers. They said nobody should be a specialist, by which they meant everyone should specialize in programming. That's what they meant. Only programmers allowed in this programmers club. No managers, no testers, no documenters. No, just us programmers, because we know how to get stuff done. And you couldn't really blame them, because all the books about how to do software development were all like paperwork, 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 instead of focusing on working code. So Agile came out of this reaction to, they say reaction to waterfall. It wasn't reaction to waterfall. It was a reaction to stupidity, is what it was. And there's a lot of stupidity about what the right way was to develop software. And so here, my colleagues in the testing world, my colleagues in the context-driven testing world, I should say, we were making fun of all of our colleagues who believed in these ways of testing that didn't really work. But then we got lumped in with all of them when they just got rid of all the testers in Agile. Oh, wait, I hit the wrong button. This would be better. Okay. So, see, when the Agilists said, well, we don't really need to focus on testing anymore, we don't need a role for testers per se, what that meant is that if you were good at testing, you just lost your support base. Because for good or for ill, the best place to be if you want to develop yourself as an excellent testing specialist was in a testing group, which at least agreed that your job should exist, even if you had to constantly fight with your manager about what it meant to be a good tester. Then the people who still are doing testing turn into tool jockeys. And I'm worried about that when I talk to some of these people in the expo selling tools, because all they talk about is automated tests, automated tests. I'm like, well, do you know what a tester does? Oh yeah, the guy who presses the buttons. That's what a tester does. He just gets on the bicycle and rides it. That bicycle out there. That must be what the tester does. So basically, almost literally a hamster on a wheel is the subtext of that thing out there. Now, I talk with the guy, and it's not really about that. But when I was walking up, it's like, is that the tester on the bicycle? And then all the smart stuff is done by this automated tool? That's not how testing works. As a tester, I'm always using my mind, my fingers. Stop looking at my fingers. Testing's here, not here. Why are you looking at these fingers? Up here. That's what the testing is. Testing's in the mind. Testing's about the mind. Testing is about your ideas and your thoughts. It's not about the clicks you make. So when you have something you call an automated test, it's not an automated test. It's automated clicks, but not an automated test. The testing, it was always inside here. So I run my automation, which is doing automated fact checking, thank you very much. I run my automation, and then I turn that into a test by thinking about what has just happened, by witnessing it, by monitoring it, by redesigning it, by maintaining it. All of that is the testing. Okay, so this fact checking, which I might have my automation doing 100,000 different fact checks. I love that. I want that. I'm building automation all the time. I'm just not making the mistake of saying that the automation is the testing. The automation is support for the testing that I do. And by the way, programmers already know this. You don't have anyone in the programming world saying, are you an automated programmer or a manual programmer? But they say that about testers, don't they? Programmers are like, what do you mean? I'm constantly using tools. I mean, we're all manual or we're all automated. Just that distinction doesn't even make sense in the development world. Yes, and it also doesn't make sense in the testing world. So the problem is that now if you're a tester in an Agile team, often you're just a tool operator. You're just expected to put given, when, then sentences into Cucumber tools, and then you get your gherkin on your Jenkins, and all kinds of double entendres result. And ultimately what that means is anyone doing testing is perpetually stressed. And this is what I see with my clients, because I go around, I talk to different companies. I usually go teach a class in a company, and then I tour and I talk to testers in the company while I'm there. And what I'm seeing are people who say, I don't have any time to worry about what is my test strategy. I don't know what you're talking about when you ask me what is my test strategy. We just have to, I've got these cards. I see a card on the wall or in Trello or in Jira, and I just have to write my test cases for the car, for the story, and then there's no time, then keep going, keep going, keep going. That's what that is shallow software testing. And of course people wonder why I go on and on about why do you need to specialize in software testing, because anybody can do shallow testing. Anyone can do that. You don't need special skills to do that. You just operate your automation tool, write a few things, get your shallow test going. It's just that the testing that I do that finds bugs that aren't obvious is not testing that fits into a get it done in 15 minutes kind of situation. Okay, so the testers I talk to, they just go like, they don't have any time to think. I don't have any time to think about my test data. I don't have any time to think about new test techniques. I don't have time to think about, is this the right kind of testing, what the risks are. I don't have time for that. That's some sort of highfalutin college stuff. I'm down here in the belly of the Titanic shoveling coal no matter what's happening up there. That's what's happened, I think. And so, here you got your mammoths. Turns out that when the mammoths went extinct, there's a bunch of effects that had on the ecosystem. Among them, there were a bunch of species of tree that went extinct because they had these big, huge fruits that the mammoths used to eat and deposit the seeds all over the place, and then they did it, and then the trees went extinct. And that's what I'm saying, is that when management got taken away, the Agilists were like, no, we don't need management, because what is management? Management are just people trying to tell you what to do. You know who also thinks that? Peter Pan. Like, we don't need adults. We do whatever we want. It's a Neverland. That means that if you are a skilled tester who wishes to be a skilled super ninja tester, developing your ability to use, if necessary, techniques such as de Bryan sequences and gray code to get the nuances of combinatorial testing. Like, do you even know what those things are? Probably don't. Of course you don't. Nobody knows what de Bryan sequences are. I know, because I'm a total geek about combinatorial testing, and I collect these ideas for different ways to do sophisticated combinatorial testing so that I can find bugs that other people don't, and I can find them systematically instead of accidentally. So I'm there trying to ignore the fact that I don't have a manager who understands my work anymore or even cares. But see, on either side, on one side we've got this automated testing stuff that they talk about. That's the driverless test executioner vehicle. And then on the other side, we have another problem in the industry, lowered quality standards. People say, well, we just need a minimum viable product. We just need an app that has the minimum features. And if there's a problem, we'll just rev it. We'll just put it in. We'll just make it a little better. And you want to say, well, yeah, but Mr. Musk, this is a rocket that's going to the moon. Maybe we want to have a different standard than WhatsApp. Okay, maybe we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to Facebook all the time. I agree that if you are in a startup and there's very low stakes and you're hoping that Google will buy you next week, then don't hire a tester. Hire a con man. That's what you want. You want to hire someone who tells a slick story. That's what you want. You want really nice demos. And no one's going to, it's like late night TV where you got the Chop-O-Matic and no one's watching that going, but I wonder how the Chop-O-Matic looks after 2 months of hard use. Is it still in as good a shape as it is on night one? Nobody cares. No one asks that. They just say, I want the Chop-O-Matic. It looks cool. It chops stuff. And then you get it, and it's made of chintzy plastic and falls apart in 2 days. I bought one of those things once, and I had that exact experience of, I forgot to think about durability when I was watching all the things that Chop-O-Matic does. So this erodes the environment for professional super testers like the person I decided I wanted to be. What does that mean? I think that means that good testers must become good meta testers. In other words, you must take into yourself the things that test management was doing for you, and you must now do them for yourself. You must be self-sufficient in that regard. So here's a list of everything that I could think of at the moment about what does it mean to do meta testing. Now, note for you who don't do a lot of public speaking, like Jenny, you don't do a whole lot of public speaking. Never make a slide like this. Never make full of text that you can't read. Don't do that. Unless all you're using the slide for is to give an impression that there's a lot of stuff there. Like, there's a lot of stuff here. You can read about it later. The PDF will be available. So I'm not going to read the slide, but I just want to highlight a few things that are here. Just notice that I've divided it into meta testing toward yourself, toward your project, and toward other people doing testing. And I'm going to come back to yourself, but there's elements of the project. You've got to acquire the time, information, and resources to do your testing. You've got to evaluate the need for testing. That's not testing, but it certainly is meta testing, creating the environment where testing can work. Because if there's not a lot of need for testing, you shouldn't be doing deep testing. If you try to do deep testing and the project doesn't need it, then people will just think you're a crazy testing obsessive that they need to talk quietly around to not set off your testing instincts. You've got to communicate your results. And a big part of meta testing is working with other people who are not testing specialists but are helping you test. That's a big part of it. Lots of people should be involved in testing, even though they're not testing specialists. They never will be testing specialists. They don't want to be testing specialists. And yet they can be helpful in testing. And they'll be more helpful in testing if someone who is a testing specialist is gently assisting, facilitating that process. So that's what the bottom stuff is. It involves recruiting people who can test even part-time, even people who are developers. Like, come over here and help me test for a day. Come on, I'll get you pizza. I'll give you chocolate. Fostering clear and powerful ways to explain testing. I think this is a very underrated skill that if you don't explain testing very well, then people don't know why they should help you do it. You don't make it sound fun. You don't make it sound important. So it's just this sloggy task that everyone has to do, and it's like cleaning the kitchen, the office kitchen. It's not something that's a exciting thing to do. I want to focus right now on two things: developing your professional testing mentality and advocating for the testing role. So I'm going to pick those two things out of all these, and I'm going to go into more detail on those, which is another technique. If you put a whole bunch of things with text on, is just have your talk be about just one little segment of it, and then you can ask forgiveness for not covering the entire subject. So this is new material. This is something I just recently realized when I'm looking back on my last 25 years of teaching testers around the world. I realized that I've been teaching people sort of unconsciously to develop these 6 different mentalities. And all these mentalities build up toward competence in testing. And so I'm excited about that. I want to start doing this more intentionally now rather than unconsciously. But let me walk through them. Everything at the core of all these mentalities is an ultimate mentality, which is the agent mentality. The agent mentality represents agency. Agency in sociology is the power to choose. The power to choose for oneself is called agency. So, when you take someone's agency away, what you're doing is you're not letting them have choices. You're forcing them into a certain role, a certain situation that they might not want to be in. Well, I'm a high school dropout, and the reason I'm a high school dropout is because I have a thing about agency. I cannot let anybody tell me that I have to do something unless I respect them and they respect me. Then, in that case, I'll listen. Or if they have a gun or have the power to imprison me, I'll also give them that. But in school, I noticed they didn't have guns and they couldn't imprison me. I could leave legally when I achieved 16 years of age, so I was out of there fast. I was just fighting. I was making trouble. That's what we want people to do. Like, leave. Don't make it horrible for everyone else. Don't fight with everybody. Just get out of there. So I got out of there, and I had the support of my father to make my own way in life, and I decided that for me, self-education was the way to go. Now, self-education, if anyone here is self-educated, you know that means that you are actually mentor-educated. You find people in your life who become your teachers. You listen to them, and they help you. So I found a set of mentors. My first manager at Apple Computer was like that, who took me under his wing. Well, he gave me the job, and he realized I needed a lot of help to learn how to coexist with other humans. And he helped me with that, sent me to a lot of management training that Apple Computer had available. And I'm very, very thankful for him. And I try to pass that on now. So agency is, can you even take responsibility for yourself at all? Do you realize that you can talk back to me? So if I'm developing a tester, a brand new tester to work with me, one of the first things I want to do is give them a sense of control. I'm not going to give them a bunch of scripts. I say, here's a product. I want you to find bugs in it. Let's see how many bugs you can find in the next 2 hours. Go find bugs. Well, how do I test? I'll tell you that later. What I want you to have right now are low expectations, because I don't expect very much from you because you're brand new. But just see if you can find anything that looks wrong. And if you see something that looks wrong as you interact with this product, then come to me and let's see what you come up with. And what they're going to find is they can see a lot of things that look wrong. And some of them will be really wrong and other things will not be wrong. But they'll start to say, oh, I can do this testing stuff. I can make my own choices. I don't need to be told exactly what to do. And I want to develop them into someone who can talk back to me. Even though they're 30 years my junior, I want them to feel like they can disagree with me and not get squashed for it. That's agency. That's the beginning of professional mentality, in my opinion. So I put these textings here so that when you see the slides later, you can read that and kind of remember the things that I said. So that I'm trying to do it all with oratory. That right outside agent is craftsman. A craftsman is someone who says, I take pride in my work. So I'm an agent, I can make my own choices, but now I want to get good at this. I want to have pride in my work. I want my work to be worthy of other people's pride as well. I want to sweat the details. Okay, so that's built on top of that. And on top of that is the analyst mentality. And a lot of people are a little shaky about analysis. Some people are intuitively very good at it. Some people are really terrified of it. Everyone, I think, who's going to be a really good tester needs to come to terms with analysis. Now, analysis is all about approaching complexity and not panicking. Yes, it's complex. Yes, it's confusing. I'm confused too. The difference is I don't run. I'm going to stand there and be confused, and I know that's okay. I have the basis, I have the experience to know that it's okay to be confused, to know that that's not a sign that I'm incompetent, that something's wrong with me. Young people, they always kind of wonder, like, maybe I accidentally went through the wrong door and I shouldn't even be here. So I've got to get people to be comfortable with complexity, because here's what happens if you're not comfortable with complexity. You keep looking around saying, what's the best practice? What's the best practice? What's the script? I have to have a script to follow, because otherwise I'll be swallowed into the abyss of all the choices that I have. So craftsmanship, agency, analysis, these are mentalities I am asserting. There's another one too that's next to analysis. It's not you don't necessarily have to be an analyst to have this, and that's the provider mentality. And this is the mentality of being on a team and serving other people in a forthright, responsible way. So even if you're not comfortable with the analysis stuff, you might be comfortable with the helping other people type of thing. And we all have this ability, but we have different relationships with this ability. Some people feel more comfortable serving others, and others are less comfortable with that. I found personally that fatherhood got me really into the provider mentality. I feel comfortable serving my son and serving my wife, and then I found that bled into all other phases of my life. I started seeing service as noble, not some doormat. I don't see myself as a doormat. Like, I'm not a doormat, I'm a servant. I'm going to help you, and that's noble and powerful. That doesn't mean I'm going to take abuse, but I don't mind doing things that aren't fun for me to do if they help you do a better job. And so that's a big part of what it means to be on an agile team. That's when people talk about being an agile team member, I think they're talking about the provider mentality. Now we're getting into to something closer to testing as such. See, testing needs all these mentalities. To be an excellent tester, you need all these mentalities. But there's a special mentality for testing, which is the critic mentality. And this is something that throws a lot of people off in the agile world, because it's not about parties and fun anymore. When you get to the critic part, you have to start saying, well, I'm sorry to be the only one disagreeing with all you guys at this party, but maybe it's not a good idea to have a self-driving car. Let me go through all the reasons why we don't want self-driving cars. I don't think there are enough testers left in Silicon Valley to tell these self-driving car people how ridiculous the idea is of having a self-driving car. It's a pretty bad idea. And when people say, what, it's going to be like totally safe. Do you know anything about testing? I can tell you a lot about well, we tested it for 3 million miles and didn't have an accident. And what was that testing exactly? Was it driving around in circles for 3 million miles? Or was it blowing tree sap on your very expensive sensors for 3 million miles? I bet it wasn't that. I bet it wasn't, because tree sap falls all over my car. I've got pine trees all over the place. I get this weird, thick, crazy tree sap that you have to blast off with a high pressure washer. Oh, that's okay. We'll just give everyone car covers for their self-driving cars. Well, okay, so what if they forget to put the car cover on? And okay, how about we have self-driving cars, and now we have self-driving cruise bombs. And the suicide bombers love that, because, boy, our death rate went way down after they invented the self-driving car. That's going to be a great thing for the suicide bomber industry. Have you even thought about this? Think about it. A 14-year-old with a particular microwave emitting device can stop an entire highway full of traffic effortlessly and then run away laughing. That's the world we're going to be in. There's way more problems than that, but the point is that I read these articles about all this stuff, and I'm like, when are they going to ask a tester about any of this stuff, or anyone who sees any possible downside at all, or spends even a moment thinking about what could go wrong? See, no one thought about what could go wrong with Facebook. And then now it's actually affected the world. Facebook has influenced an election. And what is Facebook saying? Like, whoops, sorry, I guess we'll try, but it's really hard to stop this. Yeah, exactly, because the entire platform is designed to be undermined by robots. That's how it works. I don't think you're going to be able to fix that, frankly. It's just structurally built in. But the people who became billionaires doing that, they get to keep their billions, so they're not going to stop. They're going to just say, like, what's the next thing I can do to screw up the world and keep billions of dollars for it? Because, you know, if Facebook goes away, that's fine. I still got all my money. I just can't bring myself to do startups like that. I can't. Yeah, I want money, but I want to feel that I'm doing good for the world. Finally, there's the tester mentality itself, which is all the nuts and bolts of test techniques and all that stuff. But notice that in order for that to be strong and powerful and to be a really good, responsible tester, you need that agent mentality, that craftsman mentality, the analyst mentality, the provider mentality, the critic mentality. Then you can have all of the shallow skills of testing and knowing all the trivia, all the words, all that stuff, and you can have the mentality of knowing all that stuff, and now it's invested with ethics and all these other things. So part of meta testing is developing people who can be excellent, responsible, technical contributors in the testing space. And I believe that means these mentalities. Here's the mentality of the new tester. It's, you know, I'm gonna muddle. So meta testing means that when I have a new tester, I'm not relying upon them to have already developed all of these mentalities. Instead, I substitute my mentalities for theirs. In other words, I supervise them. I give them experiences that they can handle. We debrief the experiences. I import, the supervisor, coach, teammates are importing their values into this person and helping plant the seed so that they can develop their own mentality. And then there are fake testers. Oh, I hate these people. I mean, not as people. I mean, as people, I guess they're doing the best they can. Many of them do not even realize they are fake testers. But the ISTQB has created this monstrosity where people get certified knowing nothing about testing because they answered some questions that they memorized the answers to, and they think they're testers now. And all they are really are very obedient people who are pushing buttons that they're told to push. And they don't really know why. They don't know why they're using these words that they were told to use because the ISTQB told them to use those words. Don't fire me, I am ISTQB certified. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about these responsible mentalities of a thoughtful adult taking responsibility for his or her actions. Now let's compare that to a developer. Okay, here's a developer mentality. The critic mentality is the key thing for a tester. I will find trouble wherever I look. Here's the developer mentality. I invent things that end your trouble. Yeah, but I find trouble even if you try to end trouble. Well, I'll end that trouble if you find it. And so it goes back and forth like this. The maker, the critic, the maker, the critic. Now, that's related to something that meta testers need to know a lot about, which is critical distance. Critical distance. I'm going to define that as the difference between two ways of thinking. That's how I will define that. the difference between two ways of thinking. So if two people think exactly the same way, then there will be no critical distance between them. And you can simulate this in yourself if you write an email and then you immediately check that email for typos and you don't find any. And then later you send it and then your friend says, like, you put two thes. Why didn't you see that? Like, why didn't I see that? I don't know. I was too close to it, I guess. I can see it in other people's work. It's hard to see it in my work right after I write it. So the maker and the critic, if the critic's going to be effective, the critic has to separate himself from the maker's mind space and has to see it from a different point of view. I don't necessarily mean that as a critic, I don't want to know the details of how the product is created. I could very well know the details. But I am aware that the more I know about how it works, the more I'm going to think like the maker, and the more I lose perhaps important critical distance. One of the ways I deal with that is that I do everything I can to learn everything about the product and how it's built. But I work with people who don't know how the product is built, and I have them help me test because they preserve their innocence in a way that I immediately give up my innocence if I'm a testing specialist on a product. But also I have to admit that my provider mentality, it hates critical distance. It wants to eliminate distance because social distance is bad. See, critical distance is good, but social distance is bad. The problem is they're tied together. If I think very different from you, Jenna, then I'm going to be constantly irritating you when I say, well, you think that word means this, but I think that word means this other thing. So that means your presentation doesn't make any sense. What do you think of that? You're going to get pretty irritated with me eventually. That's going to create social distance. Let me define social distance for you. When I say social distance, I mean anything that causes an impediment to understanding and communication. Anything that stops us from being able to understand each other. So they're almost inverses of each other, not quite. But there's this tension that the more critical distance you have, the more social distance you tend to have. And if you erase social distance and say, I'm on your team, I want you to succeed, I'm a cheerleader for you, then you'll find it really hard to criticize, really hard to think differently, to think around or outside of what your best friend, who you love most in the world, thinks. So there's this tension inside each tester between the provider mentality that wants to say, I'll do anything for you, developer, and the critic mentality that says, but you might be totally wrong, and I have to tell you. Meta testing involves managing that. So that brings me to the testing role. That's the other thing I want to talk about, the testing role. Let me define what I think is the fundamental heuristic of the testing role. And that is that the testing specialist role, notice I didn't say tester, because you could be a testing specialist without being a tester. You could be, for instance, a test manager is a testing specialist who's not a tester necessarily. The testing specialist role is a heuristic. Heuristic here means a fallible method of solving a problem. It's a heuristic. It's a way of solving a problem. And what is the problem we're solving? Well, we've got to develop, operate, and express a good testing mentality, an effective testing mentality. So one way to do it is to specialize. There could be other ways to do it. But that's the idea. Having a role creates a focus, and the focus motivates energy. And if you don't have a role, you might not have a focus. If you don't have a focus, no one's going to spend energy. So that's classically what a role does, is it focuses attention, it focuses energy. Oh, sorry, wrong direction. Hit this button again. Okay. Now, sometimes when people say to me, I guess we're going to talk about this in the panel discussion. I'm sort of previewing some of the things I'm going to talk about. Like, why do we need testers anyway? I say, well, okay, if you don't have someone who specializes in testing, here's what's going to happen. You will not have anyone systematically committing to test? And they go, no, on our team, everybody commits to test. And I go, okay, let's define commitment. Commitment is actually spending energy on something, not just saying words like, yeah, I guess I'm responsible for testing, whatever. But are you actually investing energy in that? That's what I want to know. Because if you say, yeah, I'm responsible for testing, and I spend all my time developing because I'm more worried about development than about testing, as most people are, because they don't have time to do all the development they're supposed to do before the deadline. So when I was a developer, I had to test my own stuff, and I did almost no testing back when I was developing video games. Almost no testing. The way I thought of it is, well, I know I got to implement this feature, so I got to do that. That's on my to-do list. And I know I have to fix any bugs that I know about. So what's this testing thing? It sounds like testing is the process of putting more things on my to-do list. I'm just going to discover more bugs, and then I'll have to fix those. So let that be the last thing that I do after I'm already cleared out my to-do list. Oops, it's the end of the project. I guess I didn't get to my third priority, which was testing. That's exactly how I approached testing when I was a developer. So you don't have the commitment. Also, you don't develop the competence, because developing competence takes time and effort. That's why I've taught in Stockholm, in Sweden, maybe 20 times, 25 times in the last 18 years. But I know still only like 2 words of Swedish. I go like, I should learn Swedish. I'm in Sweden so much, but on the other hand, developing that competence is a lot of work, and everyone just wants to practice their English on me anyway, so they like it that I'm speaking English. So I guess I'll just be the English specialist in Sweden whenever I go. Readiness, that's another key thing. Will you actually be ready to test? Or on your Agile team, does someone say, it's time to test now, and you go like, oh, okay, let's see. What are we going to do? I guess going to poke at the buttons? I don't know. Log in? Sit and wait for it to crash? Boy, I just thought about testing starting 5 minutes ago, so yeah, right, you're not ready. You're not ready. A testing specialist does things like, in the next 6 weeks, I'm going to need a way to control the stuff happening on the CAN network. I better get that canoe tool, and it's going to take me a while to justify the extraordinary expense, so I have to get working on that right now to write up the proposal for it. And then you're ready when the time comes, instead of getting to that moment where you finally have your 48 hours of dedicated testing and you don't have the tools ready to go. You don't have your environments ready to go, right? Because nobody was planning ahead. And then coordination, of course. If you have a specialist and if you have a role, then that role is going to coordinate with other roles to make sure that my role isn't interrupting or hurting their role. Otherwise, you have people stumbling around. Why do people talk about silos? I don't get it. I've never seen silos except in one place. The only place that I've ever seen silos where people say, I'm only going to do this and nothing else. I mean, I've seen that outside the world of technology, but in the world of software development, I've only seen it one place, and that was the Department of Housing and Urban Development in Washington, D.C. Oh my God, that was a horrible project. That was government projects. I lasted 3 weeks on that before I resigned. That was full of people saying, this is my job. I'm not doing that job. It's like everybody had this horrible kind of vitamin deficiency where no one was getting the respect that they felt that they deserved, and so that they were refusing to do anything that was outside their narrowest definition of their job. And no one could fire them. So it's very much like Walking Dead, except the zombies are doing work, or of a kind. And you can't just use a chainsaw to get rid of them, which would make a very boring kind of zombie movie. So I was bored and I left. I don't see this, that people don't put themselves in fortresses. When I say I'm a testing specialist, the way I think of it is I'm not in a silo, I'm in a villa. I've got big windows and wide open French doors. I invite you non-testers to come to my testing villa. Help me test. I'll make it a party. I'll serve food. But you don't have to worry about washing the dishes. I'll do that. You don't have to worry about the roof. I fix the roof. I do the maintenance. You just come and have fun. That's what a testing specialist can do, is invite people to come and test while all the nasty paperwork, if any, the environment maintenance, if any, the wrangling the test data to get the test data ready, if any, is handled by people who enjoy doing that kind of thing. And the people who are visiting, supporting testers, I call them. If you're a developer and you do testing for one day, you're a supporting tester. And the person who is the testing specialist is the responsible tester, I call that. The responsible tester is in charge of making sure the quality of the work is good. The supporting tester is just there to be helpful in any way, in some way. So come have a party. We'll have a testing party at my villa. Then you can go back to your villa, and then maybe I can dabble in development sometimes. I'll take a little vacation from my villa. I'll leave the testing unattended for a little while, and I'll write a spec. I'll do business analysis stuff. I'll try some paired coding or something, and then the responsible development people, the responsible business analysts will deal with all the things that aren't fun to do, and I won't have to worry about that stuff. Maybe that's a way to think about roles. In other words, it's like this. Here's me. I'm responsible for testing. This rectangle represents my contract, my commitment. But what I can do is I can open that up. I can say, come on, help me test, and something's supposed to happen when I press this button. There we go. Here my testing friends come along, woohoo, and they run wild and they leave a mess. But I'm glad that they came. Maybe they found some bugs they wouldn't have found otherwise. Maybe they've appreciated a little bit more about the quality of the product. A lot of times we come to a consensus that we need to really upgrade this product. It really isn't good enough yet, now that they've seen it from a testing point of view. So maybe this is your context. Maybe you care about testing and no one else cares about your testing. Then you're going to need meta-testing skills to deal with that situation. Maybe you care about testing, and maybe everyone else says they care about testing, but when you ask them what they mean by testing, what they mean is button pushing, and they want to automate everything. So now you've got to use meta testing to gently work on them to get them to realize that testing, deep testing, is both important and nothing that computers do in the absence of humans. But I hope you're in this situation where you care about testing. Other people care about testing, but they're really busy, and they don't know that much about it. And so your meta testing then becomes working with them, taking care of things that they don't necessarily know how to take care of, but you're in a friendly environment rather than a hostile environment. That's what I hope your situation is. And this is my final thought. I think testers these days are turning into meta testers, or else you are endangered as the mammoth. We have to do it for the survival of our craft. Unless of course, you are fortunate to be in one of the final few organizations that still have test managers who take care of this stuff for you, and they do all that work for you. But I'm finding it harder and harder to encounter those kinds of companies these days. All right, that's my talk. I've got 4 minutes left according to this. If there's any questions or challenges, you can challenge it. You can say, who the hell are you? I mean, whatever you want. No question is too hostile for me. I pride myself on taking any kind of criticism that anybody wants to dish out, because I've already anticipated all the criticism. That's the secret, people who speak, is if you think of all the criticisms beforehand, then when people bring them up, you can relax and breathe. I'm just talking right now because I'm waiting for somebody to ask a question in case there's anyone at all. Literally nobody wants to challenge any of this nonsense that I just said. Yes?
So, not a challenge, but a question.
Okay.
So I noticed your list of, thank you, of
true testing or meta testing items, I didn't see anything in there that referred to going back to requirements or design for testing. Is there anything
Going back to requirements or
Or-
design for testing?
Yeah, getting that into the early life of a development effort.
Well, if there wasn't anything there, there should have been. There should have been. I don't have it memorized in my mind right now, and they just took it offline
maybe I
because
missed
the
it
robots
in
are
the
in
long
charge.
list, but-
So the overlords have decided to take down my slides, so I'll have to look. But let me just say, if it's not there, it ought to be added, because that one of the elements is to manage the testing at every testing involvement at every phase of the project, including before the project formally exists, when it still is an informal idea that no one has officially committed to. I would like to be involved as a testing mind at that phase, although my involvement at that phase is going to be very different than it will be later on. I have to be gentle and sympathetic, or else people will say, like, shut up, we're just getting this thing called Facebook going and you're already predicting the apocalypse. Like, give us a chance to develop the idea before you rain on this. Because if you rain on it now, it'll just float away and go down a gutter. It's not a big enough idea yet to be subject to full testing force. So I have to be a little different in my mentality and in my attitude at the beginnings of projects, unless I want to be chucked out. And certainly the ability to analyze any written material, because I don't have anything to operate yet, and I'm trying to analyze this material so I can look ahead at what kind of data that I'll need, and all that is an important skill. I think if it's not there, maybe one thing I was thinking is that's testing. That's not necessarily meta testing. That's just testing as I see it. That might be what I was thinking, but I really have to look at that. So assuming I remember this, I hope you will email me and remind me perhaps, then I want to add that. Because I really want to add to this list. I want to make this the best list that I can make it. I think it's going to be the basis of some more teaching that I'm going to do. Thank you for that. Yes?
Could you elaborate a little bit? I saw one of the items in the meta
Yes.
tester list about credibility. Could you
Yes.
elaborate just about critical distance, social distance, and credibility, and the interplay between building credibility, establishing social distance in an appropriate way, and maintaining critical distance productively?
That's such an important subject. I have an entire talk just about that. Although you're turning me on to something that I don't know that I have adequately thought through, that maybe I should think through, which is the relationship between critical distance, social distance, and credibility. It's interesting that you're connecting those together, because I don't think I had been connecting those things together, but there's a little thing in my mind which is saying that maybe there is an interesting connection there. Certainly, if you don't, there's a connection between social distance and credibility, absolutely. Because if you have too much social distance with someone, they're not going to consider you credible. You're just some outsider. You're just somebody outside. You're saying, who knows what you think, who cares? So to have credibility is already to have a certain kind of social closeness, because you are saying this person is someone that I need to listen to if they speak. But that can be complicated, because you can have credibility even if someone never talks to you. Like a great scientist might have credibility even though he has no idea who you are. There's certainly a lot of social distance between you and Neil deGrasse Tyson. And yet, if he tells me Pluto's a planet, I'm like, okay, I guess it's a planet. Whatever you say, Neil deGrasse Tyson. So there's certainly a social distance, but in a certain respect, there isn't social distance, because I have taken the idea of Neil deGrasse Tyson and I've put him inside my head. He's my little friend. So there are some nuances there that I'm just now thinking about that might deserve a whole new talk. So thank you for giving me that talk idea, but I don't have the time to answer that in much more detail here, other than I think that's an important thing that you just brought up. Basically, sociology in general is a very important aspect of testing. Testing is a very social activity. So when we reduce testing to button clicks and analysis and techniques, we're ignoring most of testing, because I can do all kinds of testing, and if my client doesn't believe me, if they don't think that I'm doing something that's related to their business, then they just ignore everything I do. It doesn't matter how right it is, it just gets completely ignored. So I have to build this social connection, the credibility. That's why I've got glasses like this. They automatically give me a 1+ on the credibility scale, because you go, atomic physicist from the 50s, listen to him. That's why I had the foresight to be born with a loud voice, and to not be too short for a man, and to be male. I know it's not fair. It's totally not fair. Absolutely right. I'm going to use whatever I have in my body to create credibility in your mind. And if I had a different body, I would do it differently and work with whatever I had. I'd probably try to talk, in a very different way if I wasn't the kind of a man that I am. But the thing is that it's subject to stereotypes. It's subject to. That's why I have a beard. I got gray in the beard, and people see the gray and they go, he must know what he's doing. Every one of those gray hairs must have been granted by a magic genie of wisdom. So, credibility, it's a big subject, and it's very much into sociology. Now, I think I'm out of time. I actually love answering questions and would be happy to do it, but I'm also cognizant of, you have all this show and all these other people that want to talk, including Jenna, which I really want to see your talk. So, but I am going to be hanging around, and I hope that people will come up to me, because I'm a very shy guy, but I love when people come up to me and want to talk to me, because I will eagerly talk with you. Thank you very much.